So as we've seen in the recent past, in the last few days, there's been a spate of arrest cases under the UAPA, the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, from Umar Khalid to Jamia students who were anti-CA protesters to even photojournalists in Kashmir. They've all been booked under the UAPA. And we have a very eminent panel here to discuss why and how this UAPA is being used as a tool for oppression amid a pandemic, amid a lockdown. And before we go on to our guests, I'd request our legal editor, the Quint's legal editor, Vakasha Sachdev, if he can take us through a brief introduction about what this law says and then take some questions to our guests. Vakasha?
So the UAPA is basically a legislation which was brought in 1967, which was supposed to be a catch-all kind of legislation to deal with things which weren't at the level of terrorism per se. But the idea was, any sort of secessionistic tendencies or sort of anti-national activities, things which could be used to restrict the right to either freedom of speech or the right to free assembly. All of these issues were to be dealt with under the UAPA. Now, the thing was, earlier we used to have specific laws, the TADA and the POTA, which dealt with terrorism offenses. But after 2004, when these were allowed to lapse, we've instead now seen the UAPA take that slack up. And it's used as this catch-all legislation for almost everything. Now, I'd like to bring in Mihir Desai here to explain to our viewers, why is the UAPA such a dangerous way to do this? Because, there are specific issues with the way it can be used to keep people in jail without trial, and also the vagueness of the definitions. These are the basics, but Mihir Desai is obviously the best person to help explain that to our viewers.
Thank you very much. I think let us understand one thing, that the UAPA, as it is being used presently, is not so much concerned with convictions of people, but keeping them behind bars for as long as possible. This is not a misuse of the law. This is the use of the law. Okay, the whole purpose of UAPA is to keep people confined for as long as possible, and then finally, if somebody gets convicted, fine. Most of the people get acquitted. It's okay, that kind of thing. The whole idea of UAPA, I mean, as it was earlier mentioned, that earlier there was TADA. TADA was allowed. There was a sunset clause. It lapsed. Then there was POTA. Both against TADA and POTA, there were huge complaints, huge demonstrations and protests about the way they were being used. And finally, I think UAPA came in. The UAPA was amended after these two acts lapsed to incorporate the provisions under UAPA. Now, there are two issues about UAPA which we must be very clear about. One is that anticipatory bail, which otherwise is available to anybody, is not permissible under the UAPA. And second thing is, the provision of bail is very, very stringent. So once you are inside, first of all, you can't prevent yourself from going inside, as we have recently seen in the case of Anand Tiltumde and Gautam Naulaka. And once you are inside, it's very difficult to get out very easily. It takes its own time. It takes years and years for people to get out of the jail. So these two are provisions which really act in a very, very strong way, in a draconian way, against people who are being charged now. And the other problem is a problem which has been compounded by the Supreme Court, by interpreting the law in such a way that it becomes even more draconian. And this is unfortunate, but this is the reality of the Supreme Court of present days, that no argument is allowed to be addressed on the issue of the merits of the case. They only go whether there is some material which can be fabricated. Okay, and on the basis of that material, they say that, okay, sorry, you won't get anticipatory bail, you won't get bail, and you are inside for years together. So I think it's an executive action compounded by the Supreme Court, which is acting in a very draconian manner to put people behind bars in matters where ordinary law and ordinary law of the land, that is the Indian Penal Code, would be sufficient, even assuming there is some criminal involvement. That's what I wanted to say. Should I repeat it in Hindi or not required?
ये यहाँ पे अगर आप हमें अभी ज्वाइन कर रहे हैं, हम यहाँ पे यूएपीए के बारे में डिस्कस कर रहे हैं कि ये एक डिसेंट के अगेंस्ट ये बहुत डेंजरस लेजिस्लेशन है, बहुत डेंजरस कानून है। तो हमारे पास एक बहुत एमिनेंट पैनल है। हमारे पास मिहिर देसाई है जो एक सीनियर एडवोकेट है बॉम्बे से, जो ह्यूमन राइट्स लॉ में एक्सपर्ट है। हमारे साथ है हर्ष मंदर, करवाने मोहब्बत, आपको पता होगा, जो बहुत सोशल एक्टिविज्म करते हैं, वो उससे जुड़े हुए हैं और बहुत सारी चीजों के साथ वो बहुत सारे मूवमेंट्स को आगे लेते हैं। हमारे पास अनुराधा भसीन है, कश्मीर टाइम्स के एडिटर हैं, और आपको पता होगा कि कश्मीर के भी जर्नलिस्ट यहाँ पे उनके खिलाफ यूएपीए के चार्जेस लग रहे हैं। अनुराधा भसीन एक बहुत सीनियर जर्नलिस्ट है जो हमें उसके बारे में एक्सप्लेन करेंगे कि वहाँ पे ये माहौल कैसे बनाया जा रहा है उनके अगेंस्ट। और बाद में करुणा नंदी जो सुप्रीम कोर्ट एडवोकेट है, वो भी हमें ज्वाइन करने वाले हैं इसको डिस्कस करने के लिए। मिहिर देसाई सर, आपने अभी इंग्लिश में समझाया था यहाँ पे कि यूएपीए इतना डेंजरस लेजिस्लेशन क्यों है। आप एक बार हिंदी में भी थोड़ा आप बता सकते हैं हमारे व्यूअर्स को कि ये एक्चुअली इतना बड़ा सा प्रॉब्लम क्यों है?
मैं संक्षिप्त में बताने की कोशिश करता हूँ मेरी बम्बईया हिंदी में। एसेंशियली सवाल यही है कि यूएपीए एक ऐसा कानून है जिसमें आपको एंटिसिपेटरी बेल या तो जामीन, नॉर्मल जामीन, वो मिल नहीं सकती है। बहुत 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 मुश्किल है ये मिलना। और इसकी वजह से लोगों को, आप नॉर्मल कानून के अंदर अगर आप डालें, इंडियन पीनल कोड में डालें, तो पहले तो आप एंटिसिपेटरी बेल ले सकते हैं या तो बेल ले सकते हैं, लेकिन इस कानून के अंदर आपको एंटिसिपेटरी बेल और बेल नहीं मिल सकती, बहुत बहुत मुश्किल से। एंटिसिपेटरी बेल तो मिल ही नहीं सकती और बेल बहुत मुश्किल से मिलती है। तो इसकी वजह से इस कानून का उपयोग यही हो रहा है कि लोगों को कुछ भी वजह दिखा के डॉक्यूमेंट्स फैब्रिकेट करके अंदर डाल दें और फिर बहुत सालों तक लोग अंदर सड़ते रहें, ये हो रहा है। और इसमें सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने भी काफी एक बहुत गलत उनका रोल रहा है कि वो एग्जीक्यूटिव को पूरा डेफर करती है, जैसे कि कश्मीर में हुआ, जैसे कि सीएए में हुआ, उसी तरह से यूएपीए के बारे में भी वो हमेशा एग्जीक्यूटिव के ऊपर डेफर करती है। डिफरेंशियल, बीइंग डिफरेंशियल टू एग्जीक्यूटिव, वो प्रॉब्लम बहुत बड़ा रहा है।
Thank you, sir. So my next question is to Anuradha Bhasin from Kashmir. She's the executive editor of Kashmir Times. Ma'am, कश्मीर में एक जर्नलिस्ट के ऊपर जो यूएपीए लगाया है, उससे क्या आपको भी डर लगता है? You've also been working in the media for so long. How does it feel to see what is your reaction when you see another journalist from the same fraternity get attacked with a UAPA charge?
There's not one case of UAPA, but two cases.
Right,
one against Masarat Zahra and another against Govt Gilani. So this time, I mean, of course, UAPA is something जो कि आप किसी भी बिना पे, किसी एविडेंस की ज़रूरत नहीं है उसमें, और आप किसी को भी कह सकते हैं कि इसमें आप पे केस लगाया जाएगा। एंड जैसे कि मिहिर साहब ने कहा अभी कि देयर विल बी नो बेल, देयर इज नो एंटिसिपेटरी बेल एंड देयर आर वेरी लिटिल चांसेस ऑफ बेल। सो यस, आई थिंक पूरी जर्नलिस्टिक फ्रेटर्निटी में एक ये डर जरूर है कि अगला कौन। 3 केसेस हो चुके हैं, एक 48 घंटे के अंदर अंदर 3 जर्नलिस्ट पे डिफरेंट केसेस लगाए गए हैं। 2 यूएपीए के हैं और एक फैक्चुअल इनएक्यूरेसीज का है। एंड ऑल दीज चार्जेस आर सो प्रीपोस्टरस एंड वन आफ्टर द अदर, सो देयर इज अ पैटर्न एंड एवरीबडी इज वेटिंग हु इज नेक्स्ट। सो ये डर तो रहता है, और खास तौर पे जम्मू कश्मीर के माहौल में नॉमिनेट किया गया है। कुछ तो कॉन्फ्लिक्ट की वजह से पिछले 30 साल से था, लेकिन जो पिछले कुछ 9 महीने से हम देख रहे हैं, अगस्त 5 के बाद जिस किस्म का फियर साइकोसिस क्रिएट किया गया है, उसमें जर्नलिस्ट में एक डर की वजह से वो काम नहीं कर पा रहे हैं अपना फ्रीली। दे आर अनएबल टू वर्क, दे आर not writing much, they're not bringing out too many stories. Comment and editorials are missing, or are about innocuous subjects.
Right. Thank you, ma'am. I'll go to Harsh, sir. Sir, you have been on the ground during the after the Delhi violence happened, and you've met with a lot of people. You've heard their testimonies. You've heard them talk about the sequence of events, etc. The people who've been booked under the UAPA or who've been arrested by Delhi police so far have mostly been. It looks like a trend towards anti-CAA protesters. The hate speech that was also made from the other end, from the other side, by a lot of BJP leaders have not been taken. No action has been taken against them. What do you think about that?
Harsh will have to.
So you have to
himself.
unmute, yeah.
Just put it.
Is this all right?
Yes.
Yeah.
There are two things that I wanted to speak about. Firstly, that all of these arrests and detentions are happening during the lockdown, and that makes it particularly worrying and frightening. This is a time when even the Supreme Court has said that we should keep, we should decongest the jail and prison, and because there's a high risk to people. But we are finding people being taken in the middle of the pandemic, in the middle of the lockdown, into police stations and jail, which I think is reflecting. They're almost using this moment when people are confined inside their homes. It is hard for lawyers to reach. It is, how can you reach out to a lawyer? How can your family members be there? How can people come out to protest? So I think that is one thing that is even more terrifying, that not only are they using the UAPA against protesters, but that they're using it against at a time when all our attention should have been devoted as a country to standing together in the fight against uh, uh, the virus, and dealing with all the suffering that has resulted from the lockdown. The people in Northeast Delhi actually have have three disasters hitting them together at this moment. They have the disaster of having survived the worst episode of anti-Muslim violence and partition in Delhi. They then are dealing with the rigors of the lockdown, which has destroyed livelihoods and pushed people towards hunger. And now they are dealing with a situation in which people are being picked up every single day, and families are unable to know where they are, to contact any lawyers and to protect them. So it's a triple disaster that has hit the people there. Why is the state doing this? I think that it is very clear. Some of us went, for instance, to the High Court saying, why are people who made hate speeches not being arrested? In response to that, the state's response largely seems to be, and the position of the Delhi police seems to be, that the violence was actually not created by the hate speech made by people like Kapil Mishra and Anurag Thakur. They are wanting to build a scenario in which they are saying that it was the protest which encompassed the entire country, mostly peaceful protests where Hindu, Muslims, Sikh, Christians, young people, working people came together in numbers with a solidarity against the changes in citizenship law. And they are trying to portray these as subversive, anti-national, violent acts. And so even a speech that I had made in Jamia is being distorted as one where I really talked about fighting discriminatory citizenship law with non-violence and love and solidarity as an instigation to violence. It is in this it is this scenario that very clearly the government is trying to build, which is to absolve them for both the discriminatory citizenship law and the hate speeches and mobilization right through the Delhi election, which resulted finally in the communal violence, and instead to place the entire burden on peaceful protesters, young people who came out to fight the discriminatory citizenship law.
So,
Would you like me to
yeah,
say
so
this in
Harsh,
Hindi? Very briefly?
हाँ हर्ष, आप थोड़ा आप यहाँ पे हिंदी में भी आप हमारे व्यूअर्स को बता सकते हैं यहाँ पे ये जो इंटेंशन लग रहा है वो कि यहाँ पे एफआईआर इन लोगों के अगेंस्ट डाला जा रहा है और वो भी यूएपीए के अंदर, इससे मैसेज क्या भेजा जा रहा है प्रोटेस्टर्स को, एक्टिविस्ट को? और जैसे आप भी ग्राउंड पे एक्टिविज्म, आप भी उस टाइम इतने सारे स्पीचेस दिए थे, आप प्रोटेस्ट में शामिल थे, आप लोगों को मदद भी कर रहे थे। हम एक्चुअली मिले थे, आपको याद होगा, पुलिस स्टेशन पे जब लोगों को अंदर किया गया था। तो इससे आपको भी क्या लगा कि आपके अगेंस्ट भी मैसेज दिया जा रहा है कि अगर आप जाके ये प्रोटेस्ट में शामिल होंगे, अगर आप जाके आवाज दोगे, स्पीचेस दोगे, तो फिर इसके वजह से आपको तो इस वजह से आपको आपके अगेंस्ट भी एफआईआर लगाया जा सकता है, वो भी यूएपीए के।
देखिए, ये तो बहुत साफ है कि बहुत क्लियर, बहुत साफ मैसेज दिया जा रहा है। एक तरफ जैसे मैंने कहा कि ना सिर्फ लोगों को यूएपीए के तहत बड़ी मात्रा में गिरफ्तार किया जा रहा है, लेकिन उससे भी ज्यादा गंभीर बात है कि ये उस वक्त हो रहा है जब पूरा देश लॉकडाउन में है, और ऐसी स्थिति में जहाँ पे लोग अपने रोजी रोटी, अपने भूख, बीमारी का जो डर है, इस सब से जूझ रहे हैं, और हम लोग ज्यादातर लोग अपने घरों में कैद हैं एक तरह से। इस सब के बीच में जब सरकार इस वक्त को चयन करती है, और ऐसे वक्त में जब सुप्रीम कोर्ट खुद कहती है कि जेलों में कम से कम लोगों को रखा जाए, ऐसे वक्त में लोगों को उठा रहे हैं, जब वकील बुलाना भी मुश्किल है, परिवारों को बाहर निकल के आपके समाज के लोग, आपके दोस्त निकले हैं आपके समर्थन में, वो असंभव हो गया है, और खबर बहुत कम छप रहे हैं, और इस सब के बीच में लोगों को पिकअप किया जा रहा है। वो एक और जो प्रोटेस्ट हो सकता था, हम में से बहुत सारे लोग बाहर निकल के इसके विरोध में, वो भी संभव नहीं है क्योंकि ये लॉकडाउन के दौरान। दूसरी बात मैं बहुत संक्षिप्त में ये कहना चाहता हूँ कि बहुत क्लियर मैसेज सरकार दे रही है कि वो मान रही है कि जिन जिन लोगों ने 3 महीनों से बहुत ज्यादातर पूरे देश में बहुत शांतिपूर्ण तरीके से हिंदू, मुस्लिम, सिख, ईसाई, नौजवान या छात्र, कामकाजी लोग, किसान जगह जगह निकले हैं। मैं ऐसी जगहों में गया हूँ जहाँ लाखों लोग निकले हैं इकट्ठा, नागरिकता कानून में जो बदलाव है उसके खिलाफ, और वो जो एकता का जो प्रदर्शन था और लोकतांत्रिक शांतिपूर्ण तरीके से विरोध का असहयोग आंदोलन, एक तरह से जो सत्याग्रह चला पूरे देश में, उसको खत्म करने की ये बहुत क्लियर मैसेज है, और ऐसे नौजवानों को पकड़ा जा रहा है जो स्टूडेंट हैं और जिन्होंने शांतिपूर्ण आंदोलन में शामिल हुए थे, और जिन लोगों ने खुल के नफरत की बात की, हिंसा के लिए भड़काया लोगों को, कपिल मिश्रा और अनुराग ठाकुर जैसे लोग, उनके खिलाफ आज तक की कोई कार्रवाई नहीं।
So at this point, I think so. Given that what we, as Harsh has pointed out here, there's this whole problem right now of messaging being sent and of this being a double whammy during the pandemic itself. Anuradha, I wanted to ask you. Obviously, as you've said, there's been an issue for Kashmiri journalists now for some time. Do you, ever since the Article 370 abrogation and the way things have changed, do you believe that that things have been, that there is an attempt now to accelerate this even further because of the pandemic, because of the fact that, you cannot have protests about it, it makes things tougher? Or do you think this is just sort of business as usual right now for a Kashmiri journalist? And how do you think Kashmiri journalists are going to have to sort of take this forward? Do they start trying to be more careful about their stories, or how do they try to address this problem?
It's very difficult to address this problem in the sense that they've already been very careful about their stories since August 5th. And in fact, to the extent that many of them are not doing stories that they feel would be uncomfortable for the government. There's a lot of self-censorship because of the sense of fear, because of level of intimidation. It's been, in some ways, yes, what is happening today is business as usual, because in the last 9 months, journalists have been summoned, they've been intimidated, they have been threatened, they've been asked to disclose their sources, and they've been even detained for a few days. Even before that, it's been business like this, because either the state was choking their financial revenue, or they were intimidating them, or the militants were intimidating them. So the journalists have faced ire from both sides, particularly in the last 2 years. Laws are being abused to jail and intimidate journalists and trump up charges against them. There was this one journalist who was picked up by the NIA, Kamran Yusuf. There was nothing found against him. One editor was picked up, and thereafter, there has been a lot of silence in the media. So it has helped the state to impose a certain silence in the media. Nonetheless, many of the journalists are still continuing to do their work as much as possible within the limited scope that is available. And that has further shrunk. And I think this COVID-19 has become a cover for further tightening the grip on the media, further silencing it, and completely gagging and even killing it. One after the other, if you have cases like this, there is going to be a lot of fear. Is there going to be, there is a lot of talk, there is a lot of thinking within Kashmiri journalists now. They're talking about it, they have condemned what has happened. Collectively, they are thinking of fighting it and struggling against it. But it remains to be seen how much they can, because as you said, because of the present situation, because of the present lockdown due to COVID-19, it is difficult for them to mobilize some kind of effective campaign.
Right. So essentially what we're seeing here is then from both sides, from protesters, from dissidents, from that side, from people who are just trying to do their jobs and report on it, there is a clear chilling effect which is happening. Aswita, I think you have a question for Mihir now.
Yes, I have a question to Mihir, sir. Sir, just 1 second. So my question is, this also comes close on the heels of the arrests of Anand Teltumbre and Gautam Navlakha. You've been the lawyer for Anand Teltumbre. So what kind of the charges that were charged on them, the slapped on them, you have on multiple occasions said that there was no evidence, there was completely flimsy charges that were slapped on them. If you can just throw some light on that.
Essentially, if you look at for instance, as far as Anand is concerned, if you look at the kind of charge, what was the evidence against him, that from a computer belonging to X, a letter is found. It's not a handwritten letter, it's not an email, a typed letter is found from Y to Z, written, found on X's computer, which speaks of something innocuous about Anand. And Anand can be anybody, because if there is no one Anand. Anand is a very common name. Anand can be a pseudonym, alias, etc., etc. On that basis, Anand is being implicated, and he's being he's put behind bars under UAPA. You see, that is the kind of evidence which exists today, and which is the kind of evidence on the basis of which he'll have to spend our years together in jail, just trying to fight this out, because nothing is recovered. Even according to the prosecution, nothing is recovered from Anand. His bank accounts are clear. His house is clear. His computer is, it appears, is clear. His phone it appears is clear. So nothing is recovered from him. Okay. Even then, on this basis, on this kind of flimsy evidence, if you're going to arrest people and keep them behind bars, it's really ridiculous. I just wanted to add one more point here, which is just taking forward what both Harsh and Anuradha were saying. That, you see, we have to realize that the present government is using, and this happens with any government which is in power when they can amass a lot of power, like in an emergent situation which is happening today. They will soon, and they've already started diluting, for instance, the labor laws, the environmental laws, etc., etc., and they will make the criminal law much more stringent in time to come by, saying that we need it, and dilute the other laws which are beneficial to the people, okay, on the ground that economy needs them. So this is what is also likely to happen in the near future. That's what I wanted.
So just one more question. So when you have these UAPA laws charged on people, the UAPA laws are terror laws. So automatically the headlines are made. So even after years, when they don't find any evidence and let them be, the damage itself is done, right?
Yes, the same thing happened with, say, for instance, Arun Pereira, who is one of the persons who is arrested, who is a journalist, who's arrested now in the same Bhima Koregaon conspiracy. He was initially arrested in 2006 under UAPA, under the then existing act, and then charged with UAPA. At the end of 3 years, he was found not guilty. He was about to come out of the jail. He was again put behind bars under UAPA. Again in 2013, he's found not guilty. Okay, and now again 2019, he's been put behind bars. Okay, 2018 on the same similar kind of allegations. Though twice he has been found not guilty of any allegations. And this is the problem that, in fact, as far as Anand is concerned, one of the reasons what had happened was that the police had, the deputy commissioner had called a press conference in which he made allegations against Anand. So we had written a notice to the government saying that these are defamatory, and you must, and give us sanction, because you need sanction to prosecute. So give us sanction to prosecute the DCP for making this kind of wild allegation. And how can you take press conferences about a person who has not even been convicted as yet, who was not even arrested at that time? Okay. But of course, the government did not respond, and that's where it stands.
Thank you so much, Mihir. So we've just been joined by Karuna Nundy, Supreme Court advocate, who's done a lot of work on free speech rights and human rights cases in not just the Supreme Court but in various high courts. Karuna, thank you so much for joining us. What we've covered so far is we've heard from Harsh and we've heard from Anuradha Bhasin here about how the UAPA, these recent FIRs under the UAPA, are almost acting in a certain way as having a bit of a chilling effect. You know, it's going to impact Kashmiri journalists who are going to see these FIRs. It's going to impact dissenters and protesters against laws. Would you be able to take us through the implications of this from a free speech perspective? Obviously, because a legislation like the UAPA, is it really something which can stand up to constitutional scrutiny under the restrictions to free speech under Article 19(2), or is this something which could change now if, say, a challenge is taken up to the Supreme Court?
Vakasha, the way the UAPA is itself framed is a problem because it is overbroad. For example, one of the things that it criminalizes is advocacy, right? And these are the explicit words of the statute. And if you read Shreya Singhal, the Supreme Court judgment by Justice Nariman, it is very clearly stated that advocacy of ideas is something that cannot be criminalized. Plus, it also lays down the propositions for the first time and as you may know, I was one of the people arguing that case. It says, firstly, that if a speech provision is overbroad, then it cannot subsist constitutionally, that it cannot pass the test of Article 19.2. And secondly, that if it has a chilling effect, then it cannot pass the test. Now, I think various provisions of the UAPA are very much that. The trouble is twofold. First, that courts in general are very hands-off when it comes to anti-terror laws. Whether it is trial courts or whether indeed it is the constitutional courts like the High Court and the Supreme Court. And that is a major difficulty, because what happens, and it happens classically, and if any of your viewers have seen the film Court, that's something that is played out in great detail there. Because then all you have to do is accuse somebody under a terror law, and automatically what happens is that certain kinds of so-called confessions are admissible. Automatically, a certain kind of preventive detention becomes permissible. Automatically, bail is something that is no longer a matter of right, even in principle, right? So it's not something that, so what happens when governments really want to go after someone is just invoke the anti-terror law like it's some kind of mantra, and then all your rights are meant to freeze. So now this is a problem. Now, about your second question, that will a constitutional challenge succeed? Now, if you look at the constitutional jurisprudence in the abstract, if you take a step back and you look at the constitutional jurisprudence, of course, such a constitutional challenge should not succeed. But today, we see the jurisprudence very much of sealed covers. We see the jurisprudence of deference to government. You know, there are, and so in such a situation, I can't see that a Supreme Court bench would so easily strike down the UAPA. I can see, actually, you know, Fali Nariman said to me that, and he was absolutely right in a public conversation. He was absolutely right that the high courts during the emergency had a much more salutary role to play in the protection of rights. And I think that to an extent, we'll have to see, to an extent this might be true still. Of course, remembering that challenges always go up to the Supreme Court. But even, you know, I think, but there are also, you know, the Supreme Court has at times also protected these rights, but I would think that in the present day, this may not be struck down. The second thing to remember, of course, is that access to justice is extremely, extremely limited now. So even if you do want to approach a court, it's very, very difficult. We have had cases where we have ultimately had video conferencing hearings, but it's taken a huge amount of urgency, people almost dying, and mentioning the case in the judge's house. So it is very, very difficult. Of course, classically in bail matters are prioritized, but if you sort of put the tag of the UAPA on it, I just think it's a uphill challenge, and all it takes is writing that provision on a piece of paper. And obviously this is a huge problem. It's a blot on our democracy.
So much Karuna. Harsh, आप अगर ये आपने अभी ये सुना है और आपने एक्चुअली कोशिश भी किया था कि दिल्ली हाई कोर्ट में जाके आपने एक रिट पिटीशन लगाया था वहां पे कि कपिल मिश्रा, अनुराग ठाकुर, परवेश वर्मा जिन्होंने जाके एक्चुअली ये स्पीचेस दिए थे वहां पे, जिसकी वजह से वायलेंस एक्चुअली हुआ था नॉर्थ ईस्ट दिल्ली में, आपने वो केस तो अभी चल रहा है, अभी उसमें कुछ प्रोग्रेस नहीं हुआ, आपके अगेंस्ट अब केसेस लगे गए हैं कि आपके अगेंस्ट एफआईआर लग जाए, तो आपको क्या लग रहा है यहाँ पे प्रोटेस्टर्स और एक्टिविस्ट के लिए नेक्स्ट स्टेप्स क्या होना चाहिए? आपको क्या लगता है इसको टैकल करने के लिए? क्योंकि जैसे आप करुणा से सुन रहे हैं कि कोर्ट्स में जाके, सुप्रीम कोर्ट में जाके ये एग्जैक्टली आपको ज्यादा कोई बेनिफिट नहीं होगा इसको चैलेंज करने के लिए, तो क्या नेक्स्ट स्टेप्स क्या है प्रोटेस्टर्स के लिए, डिसेंटर्स के लिए, जो ग्राउंड पे एक्चुअली ये कोशिश करते हैं गवर्नमेंट के खिलाफ बोलने के? हर्ष, आपका जो ऑडियो, आपको अनम्यूट करना।
You're fine. Yeah, now you can speak.
ये बेहद मुश्किल वक्त है ऐसे सभी को के लिए जो सरकार की विचारधारा और सरकार के फैसलों से असहमत है, और उससे भी ज्यादा उनके लिए जो खुल के इसका विरोध कर रहे हैं, उसके खिलाफ लिख रहे हैं, या लोकतांत्रिक तरीकों से इसके खिलाफ लड़ाई लड़ रहे हैं। ये इसलिए ज्यादा मुश्किल वक्त है कि लगभग हमारे सारे जो इंस्टीट्यूशन हैं, उनके पास जब हम जा भी रहे हैं, जुडिशरी है, नेशनल ह्यूमन राइट्स कमीशन है, उसमें हमें उस तरह का रिस्पॉन्स कई बार नहीं मिल रहा है जो हमें मिलना चाहिए। और मीडिया भी बहुत बड़ा हिस्सा है मीडिया का जो सरकार के विचारधारा और आइडियोलॉजी के साथ जुड़े हैं। ये जो केस है, इसमें इनफैक्ट करुणा में वकील भी थी उसमें, उस केस में बहुत विचित्र स्थिति हुई, क्योंकि जहां हम एक तरफ कह रहे थे कि हाई कोर्ट के सामने कि कपिल मिश्रा और अनुराग ठाकुर ने हेट स्पीच दिया था, उसके बाद ये हिंसा हुई, उनके खिलाफ कार्रवाई तुरंत की जाए, एफआईआर दर्ज है। तो उसी केस में कोई एक इंक्रीमेंट डालते हैं कि नहीं, हर्ष मंदर ने कहीं बयान दिया जो जिसने कहा कि लोगों को सड़कों पे जाना चाहिए, और उनके खिलाफ उन्होंने हिंसा को भड़काया है, और सुप्रीम हाई कोर्ट में वो एडमिट होता है, वो इम्पीचमेंट पिटीशन, पुलिस उसकी जांच कर रही है। तो मैसेज बहुत क्लियर है और कि आप सरकार के खिलाफ विरोध करेंगे तो हम आपके पास आगे पीछे कभी भी पहुंच पाएंगे। ऐसे वक्त में हमें क्या करना चाहिए? मुझे लगता है कि एक ही चीज हमें करना चाहिए, और वो है कि हम हिम्मत ना हारें, अपनी आवाज को बुलंद रखें, सच्चाई को बोलते रहें, और ज्यादा से ज्यादा लोग वही हिम्मत बनाए रखें, क्योंकि अगर हम इस चिलिंग इफेक्ट के तहत हम लोग एक एक करके चुप बैठने लगे तो सरकार जो चाहती है वो हो जाएगा। तो ऐसी स्थिति में जहां सारे और इंस्टीट्यूशंस अगर हमारे लिए काम नहीं भी कर रहे हैं, इस संविधान को हम भारत के लोगों ने अपने आप को दिया था, इस संविधान की रक्षा के लिए हम भारत के लोगों को ही हिम्मत से लड़ते रहना पड़ेगा।
Okay, before we wrap up, I have one question each to Harsh sir and Anuradha ma'am, and I think Vakasha will take his questions to me, sir, and Karuna ma'am. Harsh sir, there are a lot of young people who's working with you in your organization, and there are a lot of young people. We saw youth movement during the anti-CA protest, etc. When there's a time when there are slapping terror charges, it's as serious as being called labeled as terrorists. What is the message, or how important do you think is for the youth to come out and raise their voices? And the same question I have for Anuradha ma'am, for young journalists in Kashmir, what does this mean? What are the kind of implications that this could have on them? Harsh, if you would answer first.
I think that the 3 months that we saw the anti-CA protest, it was a wonderful moment, because we saw young people coming out after decades, really, in these numbers, primarily for the idea of solidarity, for the defense of the constitution, for the idea that we will not allow discrimination, not only against me, but against any of my brothers and sisters in this country. And I think that it is that movement of young people that the government has been completely rattled by. Even after the Delhi carnage, it will always remain a very special memory in my heart. When we found that other institutions were not working, people were giving desperate calls. I made a small call for setting up a control room in my office, and 50, 60 young people came, and for days they never slept. They didn't. Many of them didn't know each other, and they kept battling, trying to help people through the carnage. They're young people who are now on the street during COVID, risking their lives in large numbers, offering food and solidarity. Our hope for the future is in these young people who believe in the finest values of our freedom struggle and our constitution. And it is precisely these young people who are being targeted by the actions of, the message is very clear to all of those young people by what is happening today in these arrests.
Yeah. Anuradha ma'am?
Yeah, just taking on from what Harsh Mander said, there is indeed unlike in India, where you see hope, as Harsh Mander pointed out. In Kashmir, the situation is much different. Kashmir has seen 30 years of conflict, military conflict. Kashmiris picked up the gun. They also gave up the gun in hope for peace. And after they were not included in a peace process, they started peaceful resistance. That peaceful resistance was crushed and suppressed, which is why stone pelting started. And then gradually militancy resurfaced again. So we've seen that whole cycle. Other than that, what is different is that as people in India come out in support of the women of Shaheen Bagh, or for Muslims, and lots of people have come out, secular minded people, liberal people. When it comes to Kashmir, when human rights of Kashmiris are crushed, you don't see that voices. You only see demonization of Kashmiris, which is why any kind of movement within Kashmir for peaceful struggle, for peace, for rights remains, it's strong enough within, but there is no solidarity support from outside, and which further weakens it. Right now, this is one of the most militarized regions in the world. So that kind of extent of fear is extremely different. The history that Kashmiris have lived through is extremely different. And as far as younger people, how are they going to see it, including journalists? I think it is going to have a chilling effect on young media persons, on people who wanted to become journalists, and particularly women journalists. Women journalists completely disappeared in the decade of 90s.
So I think that gives us some of an idea of what are the ways in which the concerned groups can go about this. I think my two questions, which I'm going to sort of wrap up here, I'm going to ask Mihir a question. I want Karuna to then have the last word on this. Mihir, my question for you is, one of the things which is being raised right now is that there was that amendment which was made to the UAPA last year, which sought to bring individual people could be designated as terrorists. Now, is that something which we're likely to see? Because, for instance, with Masrat Zara's, it was they used Section 13, which was just unlawful activity, not a terrorism charge against her. But with the others, we're not yet sure finally what the charges against Umar Khalid, Miran Haider, and Safura Zargara are. So, what is the likelihood of that provision, which was allowing this concept of individual terrorists, which was what has been used against Akhil Gogoi? How dangerous is that going forward? And is that something which could be started to be used against people trying to raise their voices against government policy?
Well, yes, I feel that they've brought about the amendment with a purpose. And the purpose is to not just look at trying to implicate people by showing them to be part of some organization, but individually identify them irrespective of whether they belong to an organization which is banned or not. because otherwise, in order to charge you with terrorist activity, you have to be part of a banned organization, which is not the case if you are charging a person with unlawful activity under the same law. The unlawful activity, you can charge a person even if you don't belong to an organization, as long as you're talking about secession, etc., etc., etc. And you can just but remember one thing, that the other provisions of the act, namely bail, anticipatory bail, etc., etc., are equally applicable whether you are charged as a terrorist or whether you are charged for unlawful activities. So that problem still remains. That problem will continue to remain. Possibly up till now, they have not charged people with individuals with terrorism, but I'm sure a time will come when they'll start charging people, and that's a fear, and that's something which we'll all need to fight about.
So, Karuna, what I want to ask you here now is, what is then sort of, in terms of looking at this as a legal problem, because we're hearing what the activists can do, which is they can try to fight this out. In terms of a legal strategy to try and deal with something like this going forward, because as Tada and Pota were around, they were fought tooth and nail, and even though they weren't struck down by the courts, eventually those fights helped, those challenges helped ensure that those legislations were allowed to lapse and their sunset clauses were applied, and we then now, of course, they've come back, sneakily into the UAPA. So, is there a strategy which can be used, in the courts, apart from just fighting the individual cases, which can be used to try and tackle this and stop this from being a thing, perhaps by invoking the fact that this is being used during a pandemic, or what kind of strategy can be used to go forward?
I think it would be useful for lawyers working on these defenses around the country to coordinate and to make sure that the boundaries are pushed with regard to the procedural or procedural law, to make sure that whatever rights are available are pushed. Now, the second thing is that the government has perpetuated the narrative of the anti-national, and that is something that feeds very much into the use of the UAPA. For example, the accusation against the Masarat Zehra, and I think that, as Harshji was saying, the sort of making sure that narrative is changed and making sure that it's clear, the draconian nature of this law is clear, is important. Now, thirdly, I also think that one cannot give up on constitutional fights. At the same time, remembering that one has to be very, very careful before a judgment occupies the field. I mean, Anuradha Bhasin herself went to court at a time that it didn't look very likely that the internet restrictions would be lifted. And of course, in the ultimate judgment is extremely salutary, even though in that judgment itself, they didn't say that the online restrictions would be lifted immediately, which I very much think that they should have. But it was said that future judgments must comply with a particular standard. So it was a strong judgment that, to that extent, that did come. So I do think that approaches to constitutional courts cannot stop, because these are the mechanisms that exist, but they have to be careful, they have to be coordinated, and the UAPA is possibly the most, or definitely amongst the most, draconian laws that we have now, and we have quite a few. Including a number from the British era that have not only not been struck down, but have increased in their strength. And I think dealing with these carefully is going to be, and is already, a huge part of the constitutional resistance against fascist power.
And I think so. I think the last question, just to wrap this up, would be, just almost, and if anyone else also wants to chip in on this one, is there any way in which you can convince a government to give up something like these powers under the UAPA? I mean, is there any, one is obviously we've talked about the courts, we've talked about those are options where you're trying to get it struck down. Is there any way, and I can see Anuradha laughing at this one also, but is there any argument which can be built, and whether it's to the government or to government supporters, that this is dangerous and you should not want this? And of course this applies not just to the BJP but even to the whether it was the UPA who made these amendments to the UAPA to make this happen, or other governments. So is there an argument to be made to how would you try to explain to someone who thinks all of this is fine in like 2 minutes? How would you explain to them, you know what, no, this is dangerous, you should also, even if you support the government, should be worried about it?
Even opposition parties kind of voted. Sorry, I was just saying a lot of opposition parties voted in favor of the amendment last year itself. So, I mean, just not to convince the government, I feel even the opposition has to step up their conviction. Yes, Karuna, please. I'm sorry.
Very simply, it's the idea of future insurance. In a democracy, it is governments come and governments go. And so, ideally, you would have a situation where you expect to perhaps go at some point, and then you want a situation where the courts, the law, other institutions will safeguard your rights if the government comes after you, right? When you are in opposition. Now, the point is that very frequently, and this is the logical, game theory-wise, this is the logical way to look at such draconian laws, right? Now, the problem comes in is that if you have what has quite usefully been called a democratic alibi, but that in many terms, many actual ways that you have whittled away at the democracy, and for some reason, you don't expect then to perhaps go in the medium future, the near to medium future. You don't expect to not be elected. And I think this is very, very dangerous, because what it means is that the normal functioning of the democracy is then limited. But of course, as Martin Luther King says, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. So to presume that one is going to be in power indefinitely, I think would be fallacious for anyone, really, and life is long. And so the idea of future democratic insurance is something that I think any individual within government and any sensible government would take care of, and thereby not undermine the separation of powers and not undermine other institutions of a democracy.
Thank you so much, Karuna. If does anyone else want to jump in with an answer, with anything else to add to that? Otherwise, that's a slightly more hopeful note, maybe than we were perhaps expecting. But if anyone else has anything else to which they'd like to add to that, and how do you build that argument? Mihir sir, do you have anything you want to?
I quite understand the spirit of what Karuna is saying, though I personally feel in the present day and time, the BJP government at least thinks that it's there for 100 years or whatever it is, and that's what they seem to believe in. And I personally feel that your answer would be protests by the people. Okay, to whatever extent we can help build these protests, it becomes very important. And of course, finally, with whatever limitations, as Karuna herself said, that we should not lose our spaces in terms of the courts are concerned and court challenges are concerned. And I think we should also look at those options, but in a coordinated manner. Okay, that's
right.
So I think if would Anuradha or Harsh like to chip in? Otherwise, I think we can then close the conversation here with the suitable mix of both these things. Any last points?
Anuradha will have to unmute.
Wait one second. Yes, ma'am, you're unmuted. Sorry.
There isn't much awareness about what UAPA actually stands for. So among general public, even politicians, I don't know whether they knew what they were voting for when they voted for those amendments. It wasn't just BJP, but also other political parties. So I think that kind of awareness needs to be built before actually thinking about campaigning and protests and all. And something like one can draw from, maybe Harsh can add to it, the very successful model of CAA protests and campaigns, because it started from awareness first.
Harsh, any last points?
No, I do think that it does seem a very dark time, but in the end, just 3 months ago, and it's almost hazy history now. We did see this period of solidarity across the country of the kind that we haven't seen since independence. Solidarity for the values of the Constitution, the preamble being read out by people in lakhs across the country reverentially. I do think that it is a long battle, but that long arc of history bending in the end towards justice, we have to have faith in it. We have to stand together and resist with every space that democracy, whatever survives allows us, and one day we will overcome.
Thank you so much, Harsh. Asmita, would you like to just wrap up then, I think?
Yes, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us for a very interesting discussion on the UAPA. And I hope we can keep resisting the undemocratic processes that keep being thrown at us. And thank you, everybody. Take care. Stay safe during this pandemic.
Thank you once again. Bye bye. And yeah, hopefully, we can see that arc of justice bend, and we will see some change happen, especially thanks to you guys, I'm sure. We'll be keeping on trying to educate everyone. Do stay tuned and keep following the Quint for further details. Thank you.